Okay, as I said at the outset, we're going to slightly move the agenda around and take what is number 7 on the agenda, around citizens in policing, as the first item. And just before I hand over to UD, just to introduce Nick around this, obviously from my own perspective, within the police and crime plan, it does clearly align around issues around special constables, police support volunteers, community volunteers, and under the heading around making sure our criminal justice system works is the area in which this area falls under. And just a little bit around some of the work we've been doing within the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. We do actively engage with our third sector group throughout West Yorkshire, and we hold bi-monthly third sector advisory groups with reporting into what is called our Partnership Executive Group. Only last week we hosted our third annual third sector conference, which was well attended with around 130 delegates there, and we've got some really good feedback from that event which will feed in to you. And also, of course, we operate the Independent Custody Visiting Scheme through this office, which is made up of volunteers who go out and visit our custody sites pretty much at any time, any day of the week, just to ensure processes and practices are being put in place in our custody areas. And also, just finally to finish, we have a youth advisory group which is also made up of young people from the ages of 13 to 21, and they've actually played a really positive role since first being elected in 2012 in feeding in issues and comments into how they see things from a young person's perspective, which I think is important and something we shouldn't overlook in the way we police our communities. So with that, I'll hand over regarding the introduction of the report that's been produced for this afternoon.
Thank you, Commissioner. So what we want to talk with you about today is the sort of latest update really around where we are in terms of our volunteering. We are blessed in West Yorkshire to have fabulous people who come along and give up their own time to support policing, whether that's as a special constable, as a police support volunteer, or indeed a community volunteer. And we just want to give you a little bit of a flavour of numbers, some of the things that they are doing at the moment, and of course give you the opportunity to ask us any questions. So this particular area of work currently sits with Nick, and Nick's going to give you some details. Thanks, Nick.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, to summarise then, Commissioner, around citizen policing within West Yorkshire, that term covers 3 separate streams of volunteers, these being special constables, police support volunteers or PSVs, and community volunteers or CVs as they are referred to. The main difference between these streams are special constables. These are volunteers who are vetted fully, undertake 28 days of training and then perform 16 hours of police work in company with regulars as part of their duties. Police support volunteers, these are also vetted, but it's vetting is dependent on the roles they perform. They perform a number of different roles throughout the organisation, so the level of vetting does change according to where they're actually deployed and what tasks they're undertaking. These do not have any formal training, and there's no minimum number of hours that they perform every month. And the third group are community volunteers, and these are locally vetted and simply mobilised on an ad hoc basis at time of need when for a community benefit or event. They do not work out of police stations or the police estates. They work in the community supporting our staff. Yeah. In terms of learning organisational development, where I sit, we manage the citizen policing for the organisation, and this is led by a sergeant for all the citizen policing work streams and supported by project officers, volunteers and special constables. If I could just go into special constables specifically then, we have roughly 400, 391 at present. 327 are actively delivering policing at this moment in time, and we have 64 in training. Just on training, training I think is quite unique in West Yorkshire because it's delivered by special constables, for special constables. We have a team there that works out of Cargate that deliver this predominantly at weekends. And just to sing their praises, they actually won our Directorate Team of the Year award for the excellent work that they do in their own time. A fantastic bunch of individuals. And I think that's quite clear to see in the number of hours that our special constables provide. 116,000 plus in 2017, we're already up to nearly 60,000 in 2018 when the report was done. In terms of allocation, you can see the breakdown there of where they're all posted. The majority, fair to say, go to Leeds and are deployed there. We have had recruitment campaigns at the start of the year where we had over 1,000 expressions of interest. That manifested itself in 66 constables, special constables being appointed, and there's still 28 candidates going through the process. We had a second window open up in August. Not an ideal time, I have to say, because of the holidays and everything else that goes on. We still had, by the end of that, another 300 applications to process. So all in all, there's a healthy interest in being a special constable within West Yorkshire. What is particularly pleasing to see is the makeup of what our special constabulary looks like. Over 20% come from a BAME background. So we're doing some fantastic work there to engage with our local communities and get them to be part of policing and their local community. I think one of the standout figures is 61% of our special constables are actually female, which I don't think any force can match anywhere in the country at this moment in time. And again, the age profile is quite an interesting one as well. The vast majority of people, roughly 50% of the people delivering special duties, are in that bracket of 21 to 31, so they are young, keen, motivated people who want to be here and are joined up in their sway. So that's, in terms of the demographic, it's a really positive place to be in terms of our special constabulary. If we can move on then to the PSVs and the CSVs within West Yorkshire, the police service volunteers number approximately 213, of which volunteers in the strictest sense of volunteering are 170. We have police cadet leaders, because we have a healthy cadet unit, which I'll come on to later, and they number 43. Community volunteers are just under 70 at 68, and we have student guardians at 9. And pleasingly, we have 350 nearly cadets in the force spread out across the districts. Just in terms of those cadets, there's grades 1 and grades 2. They do DV, so in first year it's bronze, and second year it's silver. That's how it works. So a healthy uptake in terms of cadets there. So the volunteers, as I said at the start, they are formally vetted to perform part of their duties. Their hours are recorded. They undertake numerous tasks throughout the organisation. I think there's approximately 60 different tasks altogether that they perform. It tells you roughly, if you look at the graph on page 3, we've plateaued, we've stayed static. We place the volunteers where they want to go. So in terms of the stations and where they want to be on further down, you can see that again there's a healthy mix across the districts, and including importantly protected service operations and also protected services crime. So they perform an important function there for us. It's not just about front-end district policing, it's also about the investigation side, working with our detectives and performing involuntary functions there. As I said, the roles undertaken, I'm sure that the 43 have already looked for the cadets. The force band, which I'm sure we've all seen in various guises throughout the year at various concerts, internationally recognised, I think it's fair to say, and bring huge prestige to the reputation of the force. And that's not to do, then we've got also the force chaplaincy, which goes from strength to strength of 17 across the organisation. That welfare angle is particularly important in these trying times, as you've alluded to, in terms of the budgets and the pressures that we're facing at this moment in time. Just to clarify, they do extra work for us, not actually doing the work of any police officers. So they may do stuff like help desk meet and greet and customer ringbacks, just to support the service that we give there at within districts. Community volunteers, they volunteer for the role as it sounds. They're subject to local checking, which is a local vetting, which is a lesser of a check. They assist in various activities on an ad hoc basis, and approximately 2017 were just under 3,000 hours worth of volunteering for the organisation. They assist neighbourhood policing on initiatives, as I've alluded to, and we also have Student Guardians, which is a 10-week structured programme, working on a voluntary basis, and they're attached to Bradford College. The cadets, these are young people aged 13 to 17 undertaking a 2-year programme, 34 weekly sessions in each year, so it's a big commitment for them. We've achieved a target of 60% vulnerability. That means that we're looking at people who are potentially at risk of crime or risk of committing crime, getting them engaged with us. And I think the national target is around about 40%, so again, we're way above national targets in terms of our cadets from vulnerable backgrounds or being vulnerable, as the term goes. And it goes from strength to strength. You can see that these work out of local educational institutions. It's not done on police premises. So it's down to districts to source the cadets. And they will do that in conjunction with local educational establishments to make sure. So there is an element of local discretion in terms of recruiting and meeting local needs in terms of the cadets that we have. In terms of the community volunteers, they're spread out across the district. You'll note on the graph there, there's none at Wakefield at this moment in time. That's an area that when we restructure we are going to focus on, because it's we need to make sure that there is capacity and there's engagement at every single district. So that's a bit of work for me to do in terms of moving forward under the new restructure. In terms of the actual structure itself, you'll be aware that it has undergone a change. We've gone down from 8 individuals running to 5, and they are based out of L&OD here at Cargate under Chief Inspector Chris Norbury, who delivers that. And under the review, I think there's going to be more of a group certainly moving forward in terms of how we train and look after our volunteers and make sure that they feel valued and make sure that they're tasked appropriately to perform those functions that we need them to do and we want them to do, and more importantly, they want to do. Finally, Neighbourhood Watch. Just over 2,000 registered neighbourhood watchers according to these figures at this moment in time, which continue to increase in number. We do have a crime prevention team which is run by Chris Joyce. They're constantly reviewing trying to grow that establishment, and excuse me, I think it's fair to say that our biggest draw on demand is Bradford and Leeds, which are our biggest crime areas. In terms of value of our support volunteers, then you can look over the September 17 to August 18, 12-month period, over 25,000 volunteer hours, so 26,000 volunteer hours. Is quite phenomenal, that really. Goes in a little bit of peaks and troughs. A lot of that is around holiday time, because a lot of the cadets take up a lot of the hours in there, and obviously over the school holidays they don't always necessarily run the courses then. In terms of hard data around ethnicity and gender, again, it's promising, looking at 9.3 of all our volunteers coming from a BME background, and again, very high uptake of female volunteers, around 42%. Overall, cadets make up 81% of our community volunteers, and as I said earlier, 60% come from vulnerable background, which is way above the national target. Of course, there's a financial implication to everything. They don't cost zero, unfortunately, to run these initiatives. And there's a breakdown there in terms of the citizen policing sergeant roles that oversee it, 119,000. Cost of the hub coordinators, 45. Cost of the district coordinators, 134. And the actual cadet scheme itself costs approximately £76,000 a year to run. And then we've got things like uniforms, vetting, training, duty sheets, making up the rest of that total. The contribution of the inspector and the chief inspector, who actually manages as part of their working directive, are not factored into those costs. It's part of their portfolio, as it were, so we've not factored those in. So over the next 12 months, we are utterly focused on maintaining our commitment to citizen policing across the 15 units, cadet units across the organisation, and committed to trying to grow the number of special constables for the next 12 months. Like I said, we have approximately 400. We lose a number of per month for various reasons, but we also recruit, so we stay fairly static over the last 12 months. And as I say, it's up to undertake a partnership approach to community volunteers to increase to around 150. We have got an initiative working with West Yorkshire Fire where they're going to be called 999 Community Volunteers, and that goes live in January 2019, and that's supporting both ourselves and the fire service. And it's worthy of note that as West Yorkshire receives a bit of a beacon, because we are the regional leader on this, and for around special constabulary and share good practice and learning across the region. And that is Citizen and Policing Commissioner, subject to any questions you may wish to ask.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Nick, and a lot of information in there. I agree that special constables and all our volunteers who give up their time, you can't ask any more of people who are prepared to do that, and it really is appreciated with regards to the contribution that they make to West Yorkshire as a whole. So it's good to hear about the different aspects of volunteering and the things you've set out. I do have a few questions just to follow up. So the first one is around I think page 5, where the community volunteers. It's really just asking if you could provide possibly some examples of where initiatives have taken place on an ad hoc basis by the community volunteers assisting with neighbourhood policing, and how do you feel that is strengthening the delivery of the new neighbourhood policing model?
Right, so in terms of some of the task commissioner, what they do, they're obviously involved in supporting MPTs, a lot of leaflet drops, particularly around the Dark and Ice initiative about keeping people safe. Obviously we have some landmark events within the force, such as the Tour de Yorkshire, which we have a great number of local volunteers coming forward to support us, and that we couldn't do without them, to be perfectly honest, which is fantastic. They help regarding site visits to stations, and certainly at Cargate. They're involved in the role plays for various learning and teaching, so they get not only to contribute in terms of how they actually contribute towards the development of staff by being there, because we couldn't do it without the role players. They open and look after the police museum, for example. And I think in terms of strengthening the model, it's added value to what we're already doing. We've got the community initiatives ongoing, and it's getting people involved and engaged, and then spreading the word, as well as we're doing as local policing. It's getting the community to be part of that and engaged and bought into it, and that's the added value that they bring to being citizen in policing.
I think if you think, Commissioner, about what some of the core strands of neighbourhood policing are in the new model, some of the things that Nick's just touched upon there, for example, crime prevention, clearly is part of the prevention and early intervention strand that's helping to deliver. going out and doing community engagement work and finding out what some of the issues are within communities is another part and parcel of the problem-solving element of neighbourhood policing. So I think it all complements each other very, very well. The other thing that I think volunteering with West Yorkshire Police brings to the individual is new sets of skills, perhaps new confidence, things that they can then take away into other aspects of their lives or work or whatever. And then finally, the cadet scheme in particular I'm a very, very strong advocate for, because what we're hoping to do here is encourage young people to get their awareness of policing, perhaps then go on from being a cadet to becoming a special constable, and thereby eventually come into the organisation as, you know, a full-time employee, whether as an officer or a community support officer, or indeed a member of police staff. So that pipeline starts to become much clearer, and that's one of the reasons why, as Nick alluded to, that we do lose some of our special constables, because actually they come into the organisation as employees. So trying to encourage people at a much, much younger age, not only does that help us in terms of perhaps some of our recruitment profile, but also helps us in terms of that engaging with young people and understanding a younger person's perspective around living in West Yorkshire at the moment.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And actually just coming on then to page 6, where in terms of cadets, so it's targeted at the 13 to 17-year-old category, just to emphasise that. And obviously I'm aware of the recruitment in each of the districts for cadets. It's really to ask if you think that remains a strength, that each district can utilise it slightly differently, or has the recruitment of cadets been streamlined across West Yorkshire?
In terms of the recruitment element, Commissioner, the vast majority is online. However, not everybody does have access to a computer or a terminal, so we do still accept paper applications from cadets who want to do it. These go direct to the districts, and I think it's that they will interview, do team building exercises, sift the applications, so they're in control in terms of who they have there, and I think it gives them that local flexibility to get people in who they need and they want, you know, to be part of the cadets, to represent the communities that they serve. So I think it is a strength in terms of we have a process that everybody knows and adheres to, but equally each district does have some discretion in terms of who they choose to be part of the scheme. And again, that's why we're achieving way above the average for our vulnerability target. And as the Chiefs alluded to for all the reasons there, it's getting these young people in at an early stage, just, you know, and hopefully growing them as good citizens, if nothing else, for the future, and hopefully turning some of them into, you know, police officers or whatever function they want to join within West Yorkshire Police, not just about being a police officer, they can join some of our other posts we have. But it's working with them, it's diverting them, and it's giving them skills that will see them be able to navigate some of life's challenges in the future.
I think the fact that we've now got the 5 community policing liaison officers in place, 1 per district, obviously it's a relatively new role. That'll help to introduce some consistency across the 5 districts in terms of the selection of those cadets. But I think it is important to allow that level of flexibility, simply because vulnerability will look different in different places, and you might want to, you know, target particular vulnerabilities. So I do think that a little bit of flexibility is important. But the 5 CIPLOs talking to each other, I think, will make a huge difference as well.
And we're just in the process of, you know, that's just landed now, so it's November time, so it's something that's starting out. So we are, you know, keen to make sure we have that consistency across the force. Yeah,
and in terms of that vulnerability criteria, that's, I know it might look slightly different in some of the areas, but that's a benchmark that has to be sort of crossed, I take it.
We're very keen to have a blend of young people, and in particular those who can act as role models perhaps to others. And quite often some of the young people that we do manage to engage and bring into the cadet programme might have found themselves in very different sets of circumstances if it hadn't been for this particular opportunity. And so if we can do some kind of early intervention through the cadet scheme to encourage some young people to find themselves involved in a positive way with policing rather than perhaps a less positive way, then that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. No, thanks for that. And whilst clearly as you've set out in the report, Nick, that there is clearly a cost to some of this. Hopefully the benefits outweigh the sort of financial cost because of the numbers that we're engaging and the more perhaps harder to reach youngsters in some cases we are starting to engage with.
I think it's certainly money well spent in terms of engaging with some of our younger generation who are on the cusp of, like I say, coming from some very difficult circumstances themselves, seeing some, being either victims of crime or potential perpetrators of crime and getting them engaged in a meaningful way. I think that is excellent value for money, to be perfectly honest, and giving, like I said, the skill sets, and as the Chief said about being these positive role models for others within the community. I think they do bring, it's very much needed.
I think that there is inevitably going to be an opportunity as we move forward. We're only in our early stages of developing cadets. We're looking at our second year. There must be some opportunities, I would hope, across West Yorkshire where perhaps businesses, entrepreneurs, others might want to actually get involved and help provide some funding moving forward to continue to develop and grow this particular aspect for us, because fundamentally it's the right thing to do, but secondly we've already outlined the budgetary pressures that we're facing. I'd love to expand this scheme, but I do think we're going to need some further support from communities themselves as well.
Okay, thank you. And then also on page 6 there's a table there around the Neighbourhood Watch schemes. Are we aware of any significant gaps in West Yorkshire around these Neighbourhood Watch schemes or areas to potentially encourage more activity to get these schemes up and running?
So Neighbourhood Watch Commissioner, that sits in with the crime prevention team, and we have a team leader and 3 Neighbourhood Watch officers recently set up. Those figures are slightly updated. I had an update from Chris Joyce, who runs that team, and the actual figures at present are 2,478 Neighbourhood Watch schemes across the force. And as I alluded to in my presentation, the Leeds and Bradford district account for the highest number of these. They're constantly reviewing the position in terms of coverage. Inevitably there will be gaps. We can't say we have a blanket Neighbourhood Watch across every community within the force, or that's just not the case. However, what Chris's team are doing are looking at where these gaps exist and actively trying to set up and work with the national body of community watch coordinators to try and get people involved and get community neighbourhood watches set up to give that coverage. And that's something that they're going to be working on over the next 12 months as part of their prevention problem solving strategy in terms of growing neighbourhood watches and giving that cover across the force area, Commissioner.
Again, I think the new neighbourhood policing model will help support the continued development of Neighbourhood Watch, simply because we're now in a position, aren't we, to have much more regularised contact with individual officers and PCSOs in a way that perhaps, because of abstractions in the past, has been more difficult. The other issue for me is we've got to make sure that our Neighbourhood Watch schemes feel supported and have all the relevant literature contacts and everything else, and I think the new structure of having the new 3 officers working alongside Chris will be a big help.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of things just to follow up. So I know in Bradford we have the OWL, which is a system that Damon you'll be probably more familiar with, that seemed to be very well received, and I know that went into a bit of a review, or so really just to ask what's happened to that, and secondly, you're right, Dee. So in terms of the new neighbourhood policing teams, and I've visited quite a few in recent times, there's no doubt that communities are much more online these days with Facebook pages, and And there was an example of this in the Leeds district the other week where I spoke to some residents where they've set up their own safer neighbourhood type Facebook, and it's really just making sure that we adapt some of the neighbourhood watch practices, if you like, or principles into some of those where we can actually harness that community spirit, if you like, which might not exactly fit the neighbourhood watch model, but nevertheless are, at the end of the day, residents who are willing to engage and assist the police.
I suppose to do Nick a favour here, I'll answer that since Neighbourhood comes under my sort of leadership. In relation to Owl, yes, we did lose Owl from Bradford. It was only in Bradford. However, we are currently in negotiations, and I'm pleased to say early next year we will have a new community messaging system for the whole of the force, not just Bradford, which is of benefit. It does come with certain enhancements above and beyond what we had before, and certainly part of that system we can actually use either fully fledged neighbourhood watch systems on that, or create up other groups, for example Farm Watch, etc., on there to use modern technology rather than just the old-fashioned systems. However, the old-fashioned systems of that face-to-face contact some people still want, so we need to make sure that we cover both bases in relation to the delivery of neighbourhood watch and other watch schemes.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So the principles of Owl are going to be introduced into the new
Yes.
system. Right, thank you for that. Okay, thanks for that report then, Nick.